What is up, guys? Welcome to Boosted Motorsports. Today's video we're going to be working on the Dodge Dakota, and I'm going to be finishing up something that's been pending for a while, and I mentioned it in the last video, and that is going to be on the lowering kit on this Dodge Dakota on the rear. We did install the belltech hanger kit, but it was a used kit and we were missing a few pieces. Those few pieces are the shims to correct the pinion angle, so these two shims, and our parking brake bracket. I did not have these two pieces in the used kit that I purchased, and I tried to make up my own bracket, and you'll see this L shape that it has there. The bracket that I tried to make up just with some scrap metal I had didn't have an L shape, and it just went and bent. So as soon as it bent, I lost my functionality of the parking brake because it relies on the rigidity of this to apply the brakes, and if it's not, then yeah. So I gotta put that on, put these on. The only thing I might be missing are two nuts. Right where this kind of straddles, as you can see, it's got this eyelet in the middle here. Where this straddles around, there is a nut of some sort that I think I'm missing. But what I'm gonna do is just get this thing up in the air, see what it is. We might have to run to the hardware store. So let's go ahead, lift this up and see what we got. All right, so here's the situation in the rear. I'm probably gonna pop off these back wheels, the Viper wheels, because they're so freaking wide that it's almost impossible to line up in here. I mean, you could do it, but it'd just be easier if the wheels aren't in the way, since we're gonna have to get at these U-bolts. And see this bolt in the middle? That's the one that I was mentioning. There's supposed to be an extra nut that goes on there, and I don't know, I've heard some mixed things on the internet as far as people saying that on the RT is a little bit different. So apparently you're supposed to have an extra nut to put on here, and I think that's supposed to be on the top since we're gonna have a shim in here. I don't know if it's necessary, but I'm gonna just inspect it once I get to it. So some people were saying they flipped it. I guess there's obviously a bolt holding the leaves together, and they flipped it upside down and then put the nut on the top to try to straddle that little fork of a shim. Other than that, this is the parking brake part that I was mentioning. So hopefully you guys can see that there. So see this little bracket that I made? It bent. So obviously it just bent over like that. So I need to take off my homemade one and put in the real one. And to do that, I'm gonna have to disconnect the parking brake again. So not a big deal, but just needs to be done since these belltech hangers are on here. So anyways, I'm gonna lower it a little bit, take off the wheels, and then we can get to work. So we gotta go up, take our safeties off so we can go down. Down she goes. Okay, so both wheels are off. Let's go ahead and raise this thing back up. All right, so truck's back in the air, and now we can get to everything a little bit easier. So we'll save this one since it should be the easiest, and I wanna try to get this to beat the heat since it's extremely hot out this week. It's like 115, and I'm trying to do this in the morning. So I'm probably gonna have to run to the store, so we'll see what we need. So let's go ahead and we're gonna zip these loose. I've got this stand here. So I'm gonna use it. It's since this is a flipped axle, taking off these U-bolts or loosening them isn't gonna make the axle fall out. Like if the axle was on this side of the leaves, then you take these off and the axle would fall. But instead, what I'm gonna be using it to is turn this and push it up, right? So we're gonna push the axle up off the leaf springs so I can fit that shim in. I gotta double check, but I'm pretty sure it goes the thicker side on the back. Don't quote me on that just yet. I'm gonna take a look at the instructions again, but I do believe that's the way it's going. So let's go ahead, we'll loosen these up, and then we'll see what we got. Okay guys, so I was right. So I just loosened them, and see how on the top there, that locating pin right there, on a regular Dakota, it looks like the bolt with the nut portion, which you can see right there, So that's a bolt that goes through that spring, and there's a nut right there. Well, it's upside down on a regular Dakota, because you can see what they're doing is they're adding a second nut to the top of it, so that when we put this shim in here like that, that the axle still has a spot to center itself. So essentially what we have to do is take that bolt out and either flip it upside down and then put a double nut on that side so that it centers itself, or probably what I'm more likely to do is keep that button on top, take the bolt out, and I hope that it comes out because it is 100 years old. And what I'm going to do is we're going to put a nut underneath that button so that it sits up higher. So not the most exciting thing. I might flip it upside down. I haven't really decided either way, but we need it so that once we put this shim in here, and I'll illustrate that like this. Once the shim goes in here, the axle needs something to center itself on so that it doesn't get misplaced or, you know, slide off or something silly or roll back. So that's why we need to extend it, because right now the button just disappears into our shim. So I'm going to attempt to clamp this with what I have, and then I'm gonna probably pick up, I don't really have clamps because I don't really have a reason to have like wood clamps or anything like that here, but I'm gonna try to clamp it with what I've got maybe here, so that I can take this out, so we can take this bolt to Home Depot and get a couple nuts for it, because I don't think I have any nuts for this, whatever size it is. So let's see what happens. All right, so here's where we're at. I'm just about to clamp these or tie them together. And the button, of course, is spinning as I try to loosen this, because I just want to see if it was going to fight us. And of course, it's going to fight us. And I would assume yours is, unless you've been keeping this thing in the garage for 20 years, you're probably going to have the same issue. So I put a set of vice grips on that button. Let's see if she'll come off at all. Okay, so I can't seem to get that bolt to stop spinning, and I put vice grips on top, but it's still spinning, so I think that's a perfect opportunity to use this. What I'm gonna do is, you can see I rolled the axle forward out of the way a bit. I'm just gonna put a tack weld on it, just enough to hold it, and then we can get the nut off, and then I'll just grind the little tack weld off. So I'm thinking that's probably an easier solution. Let's go ahead and try it and see how she works. All right, don't mind my little potato weld, I'm still learning, but hopefully we can get this nut off. Let's try. All right, try to get a bit more of a potato weld on there. Let's see if this one holds. Well, I'm getting a little bit better with the welding. I doubled up on it, but I can see it's getting a better penetration, and I wasn't being so lazy with it. I actually cleaned off a section on the painted leaf with my angle grinder, and I also angle grinded that so I had clean raw metal instead of just trying to Mickey Mouse it with a wire brush. So I don't know, let's see. This thing is on here though. I'm not trying to take it off because obviously you can see I don't have clamps on it, but I'm trying to at least see if I can get it to loosen. But she's on there. Let's see what we got. Success, boys. My weld was good. Alright, so let me just put some stuff to hold the leaf together. Looks like we'll be able to get it off that way. Okay, so I just used a couple of these metal tie wraps to hold everything together, because I mean, it's not gonna go anywhere. That's already pretty well loose. So my little tack weld worked, and then I can just grind that down and we can reuse that bolt, because I really don't feel like buying one for no reason. I'm going to try to find one and deal with the parts stores. So I'm gonna zip this nut off, and then I'll grind the little tack that I put on there off, and then we can clean it up and decide and find what nut we need to use. So let's get that off. All right. Okay, so now I'm gonna clean that up with the grinder so I can get the bolt back out. All right, guys, I cleaned up and just ground that off, and then I'll clean up the bolt once I get it out. But there's the nut off, and then I should be able to slide this bolt out of here. It's a lot of work just for some shims, so let me push this forward. I can't do it with the camera in the hand, and I'll pop this bolt out. Pretty straightforward. All right, so I just used the jack, raised up the axle a little bit. Now I can get the bolt out of here. So she's out, and then I'll just clean this up outside of here, and we can reuse it. There's nothing wrong with it, but I gotta find out what size thread that is, because all of that work is just to put a second nut on there. So it doesn't look like I can do what I wanted to do, which was put a nut on the top, because it's not threaded up there. So we'll have to flip it. So we'll put it in upside down and then double nut it that way. which I don't know if that's even a good idea too, because there's not that much room over there. I'm gonna have to come up with something. Maybe I'll see if I can find a spacer or something to put in there. All right, so I'll clean this up in just a second, but I might as well go ahead and get the other one out. I'm trying to find something where I can raise this up without protruding too much, because I don't mean to discredit any of the companies that design this stuff, but the hole in the bottom is really not that big. And if I can probably show you better on this side, like this button barely fits in there. So if I were to flip this and put the nut wouldn't fit in there, and it would be holding the axle up. So I want to try and find something that's the same size as that, like a sleeve. This would be perfect, except it's just a little bit too wide. And the other thing too is you pretty much only have the distance of this button head here before it bottoms out in there. Like it pretty much stops like right there. So you really don't want to be going up too much. And the other thing too is with those shims, you're not going to be raising this up by the thickness of the fattest part of the shim. Since it's going to be in the center, it's only going to be like maybe 1/4 of an inch. So we kind of just need to find something about 1/4 of an inch, almost like this, but honestly even less, just to raise this up. So I'm going to try and MacGyver something. In the meantime, I'm going to get the other side out. We'll do the same thing, tack it. Maybe not as much tack, I don't know. I seem the once I cleaned it up, it really held. So I'm going to get another tack on there so I can get the other bolt out. All right, so I've got our little tack weld on there, and I'm hoping I don't have to go as much to the other side, so it's less cleanup. Let's see if she comes off. Nope, not enough. Gonna have to weld her a little more. All right, guys, so I put a bigger tack weld on there and managed to get everything off. So everything's hanging right now. Let me grind that sucker off, and then we can pop that bolt out of there. Okay, so she's off. Take this bolt out and clean it up. All right, we got one all cleaned up. Let's clean up the other one. Okay, so I found what I think is gonna be the perfect solution. Is found a couple of these lock washers, and they are the exact same size as the head pretty well. And so a couple of them make up, they look like they're about 1/8 of an inch each. So it's gonna make up for the 1/4 of an inch or so in the middle there, because like I mentioned, you don't wanna go too high, otherwise we're gonna be running into other issues. So the thickness there where it should be riding in and around is about 1/4. So I'm gonna go with that, drop these two in, and we'll see where we're at and make sure we're sitting pretty how I'm thinking we're going to be. Okay, so it does look like my theory is correct, that this is going to sit perfectly in the center. So we're only gonna be able to, or wanna raise it about 1/4 of an inch. So I think my two lock washer idea is gonna be perfect, so that we can maintain that button that fits perfectly in this hole, because like I said, there is not much depth between this bracket and the actual round portion of the axle. So if you start spacing that out too much, you're not going to get a flat, it's not going to mate up flat. It's going to be rocking on whatever you're trying to push in there, and it's going to be trying to dent in your axle. So when you clamp everything down. So I think my way is going to work. Let's go ahead and assemble it. All right, guys, so there I have that back installed with my two lock washers, which is the perfect height. And I tightened this down. You guys didn't miss anything. I just snugged it down. The reason why it was stuck on there so good is because there's so much crap in all of these threads everywhere. Now that they've come off and I've put PV blaster on them, everything's going back together smoothly. It's just been on there for a million years. So this is what I was trying to achieve, and this is what you guys can see. So with those two lock washers there, the button is perfectly sitting up, because this is gonna sit like this, and it's gonna sit up just enough to stick in here without binding on anything like I was mentioning earlier. And plus this is also going to suck down just a little bit. This is aluminum, so it's gonna bend once we start tightening in the U-bolts, but it's gonna end up being perfect since there's still a tiny gap right here, so it's gonna go down a little bit. So that's all set. We can go ahead and set this down in its place, really, and you know, we'll realign it here and we'll go on the other side. Alright guys, so she's sitting down beautifully, and that post fits perfectly in there, as you could expect since it originally came out of there. It's just raised up. So as you can see, it's not sitting high, and I felt it center itself on that post. So we're good, you guys. I think that was a very good solution for that problem, rather than trying to stick an extra nut on there or do something silly like that. I've seen some guys say that they flipped it upside down and put that nut up there, but then that bolt still has the same problem where that bolt is going to be trying to hit your axle tube. So I don't know. I think the way we did it was one of the better ways. Maybe you guys have seen other ways done, but anyways, I'm gonna move over here, do the same thing on this side. Okay, same deal. We'll put this bolt in, put the plate on the bottom, and put the nut on. And just behind the scenes, I've been kind of just painting everything back over, anything that we've you know, used the angle grinder on, or the weld, or any of that stuff. I've just been coating it with black paint as we go, and I'll also repaint this bolt just so it doesn't rust. Next up, throw our shim in here, like so. And you can see that fits beautifully there. And we'll go ahead and we'll lower our axle back on. All right, so we've got our shims in place, axle sitting and resting nicely. And I'm just gonna get rid of these band clamps that we put on here, or stainless steel tie wraps, if I can cut them. There we go. So I'll remove those, and I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall the U-bolts with the bottom bracket and the nuts. Ooh, those things are on there good. All right guys, so everything's on and tight, so that worked out beautifully. And like I said, they centered themselves and they fit great. So I really liked the method that we came up with. Like I said, I don't know if other people have done it that way, but worked out for us. And this is the janky bracket that we have to replace. So as you can see, it's bent and tilted over. So what I'm going to do is loosen off the cable right there. And since it's only the one parking brake that goes over to the passenger side that runs through that thing, we're going to go ahead and loosen this off, and then I can get that out of there so I can unbolt it. Okay, so once I loosen this, you can then slide this little pin out of that bracket there, and then it allows us to take this off. So I'm going to loosen this bolt, we'll swing the whole thing down, and then I'm going to have to squeeze these tabs here to get this out, but I'll show you in a second once we unbolt this. Alright, so here's my little janky bracket with some scrap metal I had laying around, but obviously it wasn't thick enough because you can see that it bent when trying to apply the parking brake. And then of course when you do that, you don't actually have the parking brake working. So I'm going to squeeze these little tabs to pop off my little bracket, and then we can slide the new one on. So I'm going to have to play a game of depressing all these at the same time and getting this off. Alright, and the new bracket is going to sit just like that there. So go ahead and we'll slide this back in, and we can let this click in, and then we'll put it back together. Okay, so we'll put our bolt back in. Okay, our cable's reconnected. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'm just gonna snug this up, take the slack out of it, and then we can go up top and readjust it. All right, so we have it readjusted, but I'm gonna wait till we get up top and get the truck on the ground so we can double check everything, we can snug it up. You can access this fairly easily just by going underneath. So right now I'm gonna get everything out of the way. We'll lower it, put our wheels back on, and put this thing back down. One other thing too, guys, is we are gonna have a rear main seal project coming here soon, because it is leaking out the back and across the transmission. You can see it right there. It's not transmission fluid because I just did this, and you can really see it's engine oil, right? It would be red if it was any other color. So because I was dreading the fact that it might be the transmission again because it's on the transmission, but just doing like this, letting it soak up and then bringing it down, you can see that it is in fact engine oil. So kind of good news, bad news, because I don't want to be messing with the transmission again, but rear main seal is going to be a project for us because we're going to have to pop that off. And I don't know, I think I've heard you can't get the pan off without lifting the engine up, so I hope that's not the case, because that would not be fun because of this cross member. But looks like we might be into something like that soon. Either that or to send it to somebody. I don't know if I even feel like doing that job, but I guess we'll do it. It's just not going to be fun, but we'll save that one for another day. Let's put her down, boys. All right, so I just finished pulling the locks off. Now we'll go down. All right, wheels are on, and I put the truck in neutral so you can see they do turn. There's a ton of resistance there since it's a limited slip, but let's go ahead and step on the parking brake and see if we need to tighten that up at all. Well, that one's locked up, even though she sounds like a wagon. This one appears to be locked up too, so I don't know. We'll adjust it. If I need to tighten it up later, we will, but at least we have a parking brake for now. All right, guys, so the truck is on the ground, it's finished, and that project is done. So I will keep you guys updated on the drivability and how it affects, you know, how the ride is in the back. And like I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned in this video, but I do have 2 shock extenders coming as well. So they're brackets that are gonna extend the shocks so that they're in their proper range of motion and the shocks aren't pretty much bottomed out. So I have those coming, so that should improve the ride quality in the rear as well. And then once all that's done, if we have, you know, those shims for the axle, we have those shock extenders, and if it's still not riding nice, we still have a couple other things. I do have a C-notch kit to give us extra travel, but I still, even when it's not bottoming out, it's not driving that well or feel that great in the back. So I'm hoping putting those shims in there and putting the axle in the right geometry helps. And I also have a rear sway bar as well. So I don't know that that will necessarily affect the ride. It probably will, you know, affect the handling a little bit, but maybe the ride, I don't know. We'll see, because I do still have the really long end links on the stock sway bar. So maybe that's affecting things as well, but lots of stuff on the way, you guys. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you give a thumbs up. I'll keep you guys updated on how this performs. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Check out the other videos on this channel. We have a lot covered on just a Dakota, or if you're a Ram fan or a Viper or all sorts of cars, check out the other videos, and we'll see you guys on the next one.